Good day, fellow rockers and moshers. Welcome to the Metal Connection, the connection to all things metal. I'm J-Dub, and today on the show, we're doing a really rad Deftones full studio album ranking. And as you can see, I got some guests with me, so I think I'm just going to start off and give them a little introduction sort of thing. They can introduce themselves. And right below me here, we got new metal superfan, Brian Lenihan. If you want to say hello.
Hey guys.
Cool, cool. And then also we got an author here, an author of a couple books, Matt Karpe. I know he's done a guide to new metal book. And so Matt, if you want to introduce yourself and maybe tell people about the book and things like that.
Hey guys, yeah, from the UK. So just last year, the New Metal Definitive Guide is out. So that brings you all up to date to the modern new metal scene, but it also goes back to the origins, discusses everything from the very beginnings of the early 90s, and then goes all the way through to focus on bands of the present day, and also the author of Korn on Track, which discusses every single song released by the band up until their brand new track and the album that drops next month.
Yeah, that's actually really rad, man. And and also to let people know, you can get those on Amazon. I don't know whether people are watching it, Amazon, UK, Australia, Canada, Amazon, US, but I'm pretty sure you can pretty well get it on Amazon anywhere. So, and then I will try to leave the links to that Amazon directly in the description and below in the video here. So there we go. I guess we'll kickstart our Deftones. Maybe I'll just volunteer myself to go so I don't put Brian on the spot. And so maybe I'll just volunteer myself to go first. And I think a cool way of doing this one is Deftones has 9 studio albums. So I think we would just do groups of 3, like I'll do like 3, 3, 3, and we'll go around. So viewers at home, you can probably kind of gather what we got going on here. We'll do groups of 3 here until we reach our 9. But so I guess I'll go first so I don't put anyone on the spot. And I'd say my bottom two were my 2 least favorite were pretty easy, but as we get into 7 to 1, it was super difficult. I don't know if you guys had a difficult time, but I had a very difficult time doing this because I feel like as soon as we do hit kind of 7 and up for me, it almost any of them could have been kind of slotted in different ways. So it was kind of just a matter of what I was feeling this particular week or this particular month. I know I've done a Deftones ranking just kind of off the cuff a couple of years ago for the Deftones Facebook group. And from what I had then and what I had now, it's vastly different. So that was kind of interesting to know that just in a matter of a few years' time, even my list alone kind of drastically was vastly different. So I don't know if you guys as well have ever felt like that or did that, but you guys, we'll get to that when we get to that. But anyway, again, I would say if I'm going to show my least favorite, again, we're all Deftones fans here. I don't think anyone in particular has an album they don't like. Maybe if you do, you'll say that when it's your turn. But I guess my least favorite Deftones album would be Saturday Night Wrist. And yeah, again, it's not necessarily saying it's a bad album. I found maybe a lot of the tracks there's a lot of more slower, melodic, mid-paced, a lot of more slower tracks. Maybe it was just a matter of, well, maybe Matt might know a little more in depth, but I felt like maybe Chino was maybe going through some stuff at that time. Maybe it wasn't the greatest headspace. Yeah. So I think that's why a lot of the songs were kind of more slower. Again, there is some. I've made some notes of some of my favorite standout tracks, and I did have some standout tracks from the album, regardless. And that's what I did want to mention. This Saturday Night Wrist, I believe, was Chi Cheng's, the bassist's, last album with the band, so it does mark kind of some, significance, even though I do find it their least best output, as you call it. But I did have a few standout tracks like Rats is a bit slower, but it is still a great song. And then we got some, actually I found the back half of the album to be better than the front half. So the back half had some bangers. There's Combat, which is a banger. And then Kim Dracula is probably my favorite song on the actual album, Kim Dracula. So there we go. And then I will go on to my next one. Actually, I kind of have a tattoo inspired by the cover, but
Ryan.
it wasn't my favorite album nonetheless, but we got the Deftones Self-Titled as my number 8. And yeah, we got a wicked colors, like wicked rose colors here and a wicked cover. But again, it's with the ranking, you have to stick these albums somewhere. So I'm not necessarily saying the album is bad. No, I'm not saying that at all. It's just, hey, when you do have to do a ranking, you are going to have to make some tough decisions. And unfortunately, I had to slot it there. And I did have some standout tracks from the album, of course. It opens up with Hexagram. We got some great frenetic screaming and some nice frenetic drumming to match the screaming that Chino's doing. We got Pins and Needles, When Girls Telephone Boys, Lucky. And actually, Lucky You is interesting because Lucky You is kind of almost like an industrial light EDM track. It almost gives me some Crosses vibes that he later did Crosses, right? I don't know if anyone remembers that Lucky You song. It's not even really a song. It's more of like a vibe, like a Crosses vibe. If anyone's wondering what I'm talking about, Crosses is Chino has a side project, Crosses, where he does take some more of those lighter industrial kind of songs, and he kind of saves that for his Crosses project. So this is that Lucky You song is probably like a song he could have done for Crosses. And then I had another song here, Bloody Cape, and that's that. And I'd say and then here now we're getting into the really tough ones for me. I feel like almost any of these bottom 7, depending on the month, the year, whatever, could all get reversed quite vastly, but this is tough. Hopefully I don't get some cringes when I show this, but for my number 7 favorite is White Pony.
What?
Yeah, I don't know. Again, this is going to be really hard thing for Deftones fans to watch. Like, oh my God, how is this all going to shake out? But I had to go with White Pony. I kind of just felt like when I did listen back to it recently, it's the sound in itself is a little dated, even though I would have bought that when it was a new release back in 2000. We're talking, back in 2000. So we're talking, 22 years ago. So, I have some nostalgia. I obviously have a ton of nostalgia built to that album. So I tried not to factor that in as much, but I did find the sound to be a little bit dated compared to where Deftones went, which is super thick and heavy and just very huge, big sound. I found like White Pony is a little maybe not as big as that, but obviously there's a ton of great songs. We're talking about Digital Bath, RX Queen, Knife Party, Korea, Change, Passenger. And I also did want to bring up the B-side that the band, I guess, doesn't like or whatever. They were kind of forced to do it, the Back to School. So I don't know, I hear lots of bad things about it, but I thought Back to School was fine. So I did want to include that as well. And I do remember when the music video to Change came out. I really loved that music video, and just like the song in general was kind of cool. It was kind of very different for the times. Obviously, back in 2000, everyone wanted everything super heavy, and here comes Deftones, and they put out kind of a non-super metal album, you'd call it. So I just thought Change was a really cool song and video and lead single. It was kind of different to what all the other bands were doing at the time. And obviously you guys are going to have your own say. So I don't expect a whole lot of chiming in right now. But Bryan, you're up next with your bottom 3.
Okay. So I'm not your typical Deftones fan. My last one is actually Adrenaline. In terms of sound, it was very raw and heavy, which I appreciate, but I don't think it's their best. Like lyrics wise, it was kind of thrown together. And my number 8 is actually, what was that?
I was gonna say that's interesting. I really wasn't expecting that. I thought you would have it higher, but that's your bottom. That's your bottom. Again, I would assume, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to assume like you don't think the album's bad or nothing.
No.
Right. But yeah, no, I probably wasn't expecting that. And I think with Deftones fans, like the real hardcore Deftones fans, everyone has like their different favorites, and I think even our list, just the three of us, are going to be vastly different.
Hmm.
Definitely.
So my next one's, which is gonna surprise another people, is Around the Fur. I think this is a lot better than Adrenaline, but still not up to par, and that might upset a lot of fans. But yeah,
This show is going to get a lot of hate from a lot of people, I think, just combined for all three of our choices there.
yeah,
Well, someone's list is going to line up with someone else's list, so it's not that bad. But again, I
yeah,
think that is the great thing about Deftones is that I think what that really means is that they have such a strong discography to like the hardcore fan base that everyone does have their own favorites and the way they view certain albums. And I know a lot of, like girls or whatever in particular are always like, I was going through this at that time, and this album really helped me go through this, get through this, and get through that. And, well, guys too, right? Go through stuff. And, there is a lot of that with Deftones, I find. But anyway, we'll keep it going here. Sorry, Brian.
My number 7 is actually Gore. I did like the experimental sound they kind of had, and I hope they expand on that in the future.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, pretty well. Like Ohms is a carry off to that, but Ohms kind of probably gets a little heavier than,
Hmm.
or a little more faster paced than some of the Gore stuff was. But I personally love Gore, so you'll have to find out where I have that ranked. But yeah, that's that, I suppose. So yeah, the great bottom three. Well, yeah, well, they're all actually does it. That is a great bottom three. So I guess things can only go up from there. But yeah, Matt, you're up next year. Let's get show up your bottom three.
Well, Brian's last pick there ties perfectly into mine then, because Gore is my least favourite of Deftones. I tried to give it a little bit of a listen again earlier, and as we've all said, there is not a bad Deftones album. There is normally 3 or 4 absolute killer tracks on every one of their albums at least. But yeah, for some reason, Gore never quite caught on with me. I love Phantom Bride and Doomed User. Those two tracks are brilliant. But I think there was just a bit too. Having listened to it again earlier, it was a bit too guitar light. I believe when OMS was coming up in obviously the promotion for that, I think there was a lot of issues with Gore that the guitars weren't utilised as much in terms of that they wanted the heavier. Stephen Carpenter wanted the heavier tones, and it didn't quite work out that way with the album. And well, yeah, Deftones have always been experimental. I just feel that's a little bit too. It doesn't quite seem to flow as well for me. So yeah, Doomed User and Phantom Bride, like I said, they are definitely two cuts that I would have in any Deftones best of compilation. But for me, that's probably where that album ends with me. So that is going to be my number 9. And quite glad that Brian also chose Adrenaline fairly early on, because again, for me, yeah, Adrenaline. Again, I think it's because it's their first album, and I appreciate how raw it sounded. Obviously, they was going for a rap metal direction because that was kind of the sound coming up in the mid-90s. It definitely put the band on the map in a sense. I know it didn't sell well to start with initially. And Engine Number 9 again is another Deftones classic for sure. Bored is a great opener. But yeah, again, Adrenaline, it still hasn't after all these years. I mean, Adrenaline was what? That's 90, nearly 30 years old now, that album. But in terms of the Deftones ones that they've put out, I would say that's the one that's aged least well. But it's still a good album. Like I said, every Deftones album is good in its own right. But for my ranking, Adrenaline, I've given it countless listens, but it's never quite got any better for me. So it remains one of my lowest. And also another one which again has some good tracks. Again, Jamie, as you were saying, killer artwork. I think that's probably the highlight of Deftones' self-titled album, and of course having to follow up White Pony with what it did for Deftones at that time. I still remember buying the album the day it came out, and I remember being pretty disappointed there. So I think they led off with Minerva as well as the lead single, which was a very un-Deftones song. I think that just proved how much record label involvement that was in terms of choosing what singles was released. Obviously, nu metal was still in the mainstream at the time as well, so I can see why they led with that song, but it is probably one of the least Deftones songs that you'll ever hear, really. And yeah, you previously mentioned with your picks, Jamie. Lucky You. I love the sort of trip hop vibe of that, real sort of gothic, eerie sort of sound. Bloody Cape is another killer tune. But yeah, that is my bottom three. So like I said, well, apart from Gore's an okay album for me, but I do still enjoy Adrenaline and the Self-Titled, but they still remain in my bottom three of the 9.
Yeah, I think when I did like a kind of a brief Deftones ranking a couple of years ago for the Facebook Deftones group, people were posting the ranking, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to rank it. And I think I did have Adrenaline quite low at that time, but when I have re-listened to it, recently or whatever, I have gotten a little higher than I originally had it. Yeah, just obviously there's this raw heaviness kind of factor at times, and the new metal thing and all that kind of stuff. But I guess I kind of will just kind of phase that into mine, and I want to get talking about Gore again because I know that's quite the controversial album. I know like people who are really into like maybe people who play music, they say that the production is bad and things like that. I don't see the production being all that bad, and maybe I don't know about bad, but I don't find. I think if there is some, I think if the production is a little bit weird or something, I think it just kind of adds to their sound. I almost think they did it on purpose because it is giving them kind of I don't know, maybe a thicker sound, a muddled back sound. I think that's, I don't know, it's kind of hard to say, hard to describe through this thing, but Gore, I do have Gore next for me, number 6. And I really love this album. I don't know what it is about it, but I know when it did come out, I super connected with it. Maybe not like lyrically or nothing like that. Just the music in general, like just the kind of experimental vibe of it. And even actually, obviously, he has a great guitar tone. Like it is a thick, heavy guitar tone. It's just not super like riff prevalent a lot of the times, but I don't know. I did super connect with this album in general, and I really do love it. It really grew on me the more I listened to it, since it did come out in 2016. But it actually really grew on me. I love the whole album basically, and I could have wrote down almost every song as a standout track for me. Well, maybe not standout track, but it's songs I do like. But I do have a ton of standout tracks from it. Again, I have no idea why I did kind of super connect with it, because I'm into like rock and metal, so I do like upbeat fast stuff, but some of the stuff isn't a whole lot of upbeat and fast on this. But I don't know, I just really loved how, I think what it is, a lot of the songs like build, like they start off kind of slow and mid-pacey, and they build into this big grand epic kind of songs. I don't know, I just really loved a lot of it. Acid Hologram, and you did mention Doomed User, and I actually even made a side note on it. I was like, killer guitar tone on Doomed User, like great riff too, just a killer riff. Even though there's not a whole lot of those on there, but hey, there is one time where he did sneak in a really rad riff. And Geometric Headdress, so epic and melodic. I think that's one of my most listened to songs on that album. I think on my iTunes alone, I think I had that like 50 times I played that. And that's just on my iTunes alone, like not including the CD or times I was traveling or whatever. So I played that song a shit ton. And I don't know, I deeply love Pittura Infamanti. I don't know what it is about that song. It just builds. It just has this build kind of aspect and kind of mellows out. And I don't know, I just super love that. I just put a heart beside that. When I wrote down the song, I just put heart. It just means I love that song. And Zenon has a cool little offbeat drum to it. Zenon, and Rubicon is great as well. But yeah, I super love that album. I love it so much that I was almost forcing myself to get it higher because I wanted to show that I do love that album so much. So here we are in my number 6. I would have loved to get it higher, but the rest of the discography is so strong. I had to create a balance somehow and didn't want to just stick it high just for the sake of sticking it high, just say, oh, I told you guys Gore is good. I'm going to get it high just for the sake of getting it high. So that was difficult. But I do love that album. I know it's a controversial album. So then next up, I think it's already been, it's been mentioned by both of you already. So next up, I had Adrenaline as my number 5. And yeah, I'm not going to say a whole lot about it. I think anyone that is familiar with Deftones is obviously familiar with Adrenaline. And, obviously it's some of the great songs that are on there. Like, obviously it's some of the great bangers and things like that are on there, heavier songs. 1 Week, Root, 7 Words, Birthmark, Engine Number 9. And so I did want to mention the B-side kind of on Adrenaline, where there was Teething.
On the Crow soundtrack, the second.
Right, yes, and I did actually also want to bring up that Crow soundtrack. Like, I remember watching the Crow movie back in the day, and that Teething song was just incredible. It was kind of weird that it didn't make the actual album. Like,
and the band are actually in the film performing it as well.
And yeah, it's actually weird is the Teething actually wasn't on the album. So I think the only time that you did get it is maybe a B-side or on that Crow soundtrack. And yeah, that Crow soundtrack was great. I don't know if anyone remembers that at the time. I also think there was a Rob Zombie song on the Crow soundtrack. Really cool.
I think so. Korn had Sean Olsen on there as well as a unreleased unreleased track that was on there as well.
I forget about that, but I know there was that really cool Rob Zombie single that I think Boogeyman. I think I'm Your Boogeyman was on the Crow soundtrack. But anyway,
I've got the CD somewhere, but I can't see where it was.
And yeah, it's kind of interesting to think I'm at number 4 already. So like, yeah, I'm already at 4. Adrenaline was my 5th. Number 4 for me. I'd say my top 4, I was almost losing my marbles in a sense where my top 4 I could have switched and flipped in any sort of way. So it's one of those things where if I were to do this 2 months, my number 4 might be something else. If I were to do it a year later, my number 4, my 4, 3, 2, and 1 would just all be constantly flip-flopping. So, and actually I do know specifically the last time I did the Deftones ranking a couple of years ago, I had Koi no Yokan as number 1. And I have since dropped it to number 4. That doesn't mean anything bad. It's obviously an incredible album. The fact that I had it number 1 last time, it might even be some of your guys' number 1, so we'll wait on that. But I think another factor that I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I think a factor, the way I've got it to number 4, that it's dropped down, is Ohms has since came out since I did the previously ranking. So when Ohms came out, that kind of threw everything for a loop here. So, bear with me on the Koi no Yokan. I have heard from a lot of fans that this is their number 1. So again, it's not a bad thing if I've had it at number 1 before. I could have it at number 1 again. So that's just, again, when you do these rankings, you have to get it all. You have to see where you have to crunch it out. You have to make hard decisions. And that, again, these last 4 for me are just super hard decisions. And Koi no Yokan, like, it's pretty well the whole album. I wrote down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 standout tracks. So that is like most of the album at this point. So, and that's actually, it's cool because, there's kind of some Gore vibes going on in a few songs. I wrote down Romantic Dreams kind of has like a bit of a Gore vibe going on, and Leathers, Poltergeist is like a super sonically heavy song. Graphic Nature has a cool cadence to it. I don't know if that was the right word to describe it. It's all I could come up with at the time for a word to describe it. But I thought Graphic Nature has a cool cadence about it. He has that part, "Tell me how you doing," in it. I can't sing, but he's got that really cool part. I like that part in it. Kind of when it does a time shift there or whatever. And then Tempest, I wrote down specifically on Tempest. Chino sounds great on Tempest. It kind of builds into this big kind of huge song, and just Chino's great. I think Tempest is like a 6-minute song. So it is one of those songs that just builds and gets big, and then Chino just sounds great. And I wrote down, yeah, Rosemary kind of has another kind of gore type vibe for it, like pre-gore. Obviously, it was kind of like kind of that might be a glimpse of where they were heading back in 2012 with Koi, and then Gore came out 4 years later. So it was kind of giving people a glimpse of where they were going with Rosemary, and then Goon Squad again, just a killer guitar riff on Goon Squad, and killer guitar tone and riff on that. And yeah, those are my standout tracks for that. And yeah, Koi no Yokon, number 4 for me. So we'll get Bryan next to run through his 6 through 4.
So my number 6 is Saturday Night Wrist. The lead single "Hole in the Earth" is one of my favorite Deftones songs. So that's why I have that kind of high. My number 5 is actually Self-Titled.
Wow.
I really think, I don't know, like Chino just, I don't know, that ear piercing screech he kind of has. I really like that when I've listened to it.
Mhm.
So I thought that was like unique.
It does have some screechy frenetic screams and things like that.
Yeah.
Some outbursts, as I'd call it.
My number 4 is White Pony.
Oh wow. I think a ton of people tie nostalgia to, well, maybe not nostalgia, but it is a great album. But I think a lot of people, were discovering Deftones around this time, and a lot of people have a nostalgia tied to it. So you're probably going to find some very varied opinions on this album, particularly. And obviously, I think everyone would disagree that "Passenger" with Maynard there from Tool is just a superb song.
Yeah.
Definitely. We'll get to that when I get my pick.
Yeah, great. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I guess you ripped through your 3. Yeah, you ripped through your
Yeah,
3.
yeah.
Good stuff. Cool. And Matt, if you want to go through your next bunch.
Okay, so then I'm going to go with Koi no Yakan. Like you said, I think this at the time, which I'm going to get to with the next pick, but just a little bit of a spoiler here. Obviously, you touched on Saturday Night Wrist earlier on. There was some inner turmoil within the band during that time, and Chino's addictions has been sort of well documented. But I felt that when they returned with Diamond Eyes and then Koi no Yakan, it continued the momentum of a sort of like a second wind of Deftones, arguably putting out some of their most prolific material at this time. So yeah, I remember picking this album up again on the day it came out. Instantly, Swerve City's obviously quite a direct intro to the album, but Leathers, I remember, I mean, that still is one of my top 10 Deftones songs. I think just that just they're a very simple little riff build up and then just exploding in with Chino's scream, and one of their best choruses for me as well. And actually, one of my favourite songs on that album and of Deftones, it wasn't originally, which is Rosemary. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Kevin Bacon drama called The Following. It came out a few years ago where
Love that
he was
show.
he was a detective and he was chasing a serial killer that kind of sort of formed his own cult. Well, the very last scene of that whole series, Rosemary played out at the
Yeah,
end,
I
and
do
I
remember
just
that.
yeah, and I just remember because I think it was in the first episode they played a bit of Change in the House of
Yep,
Flies,
yep,
as
yep.
well as Marilyn Manson. But yeah, that whole scene tying up the whole series with Rosemary, it fitted perfectly. And then when I went back and just listened to the song on its own, I definitely had a newfound respect for that song. And yes, that is one that, because it's as well for Deftones, it's a really long song. It's quite progressive, but it is just it's a classic Deftones song, really, without them ever sort of intending it to be. I think it was, it's quite low down the track list in there, but yeah. So Koi no Yokan. I think we're all struggling with that album title. That would be my number 9, 8, 7, 6. So yeah, going straight into 5 with Saturday Night Wrist. Actually, probably one of my favorite album covers of theirs. I love Deftones imagery, what they do with the albums. And again, at the time, I think as the early listens, I was happy with the album, but at the same time, slightly unfulfilled. And obviously, as it came out later on, we realised that not all was right within the band. Like you said, Jamie, the fact that it was Cheese' last album as well with the band, so there is a little bit of a nostalgia to it and a little bit of romanticism, I guess. Kim Dracula, definitely my favourite song on the album as well. Again, it's quite a direct, energetic, non-stop, smash in the face track. Hole in the Earth is a killer intro as well. Very good song. I really do like that one. And the Pink Cell Phone track, I really enjoyed most of it until it came to that last part with the female reeling off the. Well, she's actually quite disparaging of British people at the time on the actual track, which doesn't bother me. But the actual, for what it was, the song, again, it was another one of those crosses, Team Sleep kind of vibe, trip hop kind of track. And then yeah, it flows pretty well. Serge from System of a Down's on one of the tracks on there, isn't he as well? Cherry Waves was a pretty nice atmospheric, that ambience that Deftones have become known for. That's a good tune on there as well. But yeah, just in general, and again discussing everything about what Deftones had done prior and after. That's why that one becomes my number 5. And again, this one, it's number 4, but when it first came out, it could have easily, or it did for a little while, get into my top 3. But because of the quality of their music, so I'm going for OMS at number 4 with the nice flashy cover there. Yeah, when this came out, was it last year now, wasn't it? No, 2020 this one came out. Loved it from the very beginning. Urantia, the actual track Urantia was, I didn't really think Deftones had a song like that in them left this long into their career, but that is just such a brilliant song, probably in my top 5 straight away. And yeah, the whole track listing, it just flows. The Spell of Mathematics, that was a really cool tune as well. This Link is Dead, Radiant City, all the way through. I think OMS, the actual title track, was probably the weakest track on that, which when I actually listened to the album all the way through, it made me quite surprised that they, I believe they chose that as the lead single, didn't they? And to think it is the weakest track on there was quite surprising, really. But yeah, OMS is at my number 4. But even that, I still put that as a 7 or 8 out of 10 album in terms of quality.
Yeah, I was going to chime in when you did mention Saturday Night Wrist. Again, it's going to be one of these things like agree to disagree, but like I think you briefly said, it flows well. And I think that's why I have Saturday Night Wrist as my least favorite, because I didn't think it flows well at all. Because like I thought like maybe some of the first third of it is good, and then the middle third is not good, and then the back third is great. So I thought that didn't flow at all. But that will lead me into my top 3 actually, as you're discussing OMS, is I have OMS as my 3rd, and I've been talking about flows. Is that is great that you did mention that about OMS. Is that is something that's so great about OMS, is that it does have it flows great from song to song to song. I actually don't have a single skipper on OMS at all. Like I actually like every single song. This is a super strong album, and I did want to lead that into. You did also mention about I forget what song in particularly you said, but in one song you said that you're surprised that they had this much oomph and this much left in them, like that type of song left in them. And I had something kind of similar where it's just so surprising that Deftones is, I don't know the year, but actually, well, I think they were formed in 92, 93. So to think that 30 years into their career, they can put out an album this damn good and this damn quality and such a high standard, and it flows great, and they're still heavy. Like this song, this is much heavier. Well, not much heavier, but it's heavier than Gore. There's a lot more up tempo tracks, even though Deftones does have that ambience. I'm going to steal that word that you used earlier. That ambience, that experiment. They're just blending everything so well at this point. Like this is like a perfect album. Like this is a 10 out of 10 for me. It could easily be my number one. It could easily be my number two, and it is my number three. But yeah, it's almost one of those things. I could just list off the whole every track as my favorite track. I
I
tried.
think as well, didn't I think Terry Date came back to produce that album as well,
Yes, he
didn't he
did.
as well? Which is I think what brought that extra spice back to the band. I'm sure
Uh,
they
yeah, I don't know what it is. I have no
obviously
idea.
he was with them for the first four albums, maybe five, and then he went off and they was using obviously different producers further down. But I'm pretty sure with Arms they returned to using Terry Date as well, which obviously that relationship sort of come back together. He knew what Deftones wanted. They knew what he could bring to the table, and I think that's probably what cemented that album's overall sound and quality as well.
And just like as a fan, like I haven't heard anyone really like diss this album or talk shit about it, like this album, and it's just so incredible to think that they're still far into their career that they can create such a fan favorite album right out the gate. Like it came out and there was not very much negativity about it at all. There's some people that needed some warming up to it, but even for me, I try not to get super hyped about albums. Like when they set a release date and people start getting hyped about it, I'm just like, I'm just one of those guys. Okay, when it's out and I hear it, then I can make my own judgments. But so it was like one of those things where I didn't have super high expectations. I don't know why. It's just with Gore, it's just Gore for me was like a grower. It's like okay, you listen to it 5, 10 times, and okay, it's starting to pick up for me. So it was like one of those things where by the time the 50th time I've listened to it, okay, Gore has really gotten to my brain. So it was like a slow builder. This is one of those albums. Like as soon as you play it, the first time you play it, you're like over impressed. Like I was over impressed because I try not to have expectations or whatever. I just play it and okay, my expectations are that day. I try not to like have my expectations building for months and months and months and then be let down or love it or whatever. So that's kind of that on that. It's just like I know the first time I listened to it, I was actually kind of blown away because I wasn't expecting it to be so good. I know 2020, that was probably my favorite album of 2020 for sure. I'm pretty sure it was. But it's getting super long-winded about Ohms, but Ohms is really that good. So I kind of thought I could say a bunch about it. But yeah, just wow, front to beginning, and yeah, every song. But I tried to key out some key tracks here. I keyed out Error. It's like kind of a, I don't know if it's a proper word, but like kind of like a gallopy, catchy riff on Error, and Radiant City was great. And then the one song you didn't like, I thought is really great. Ohms, the self-titled track, or the Ohms track. But yeah, I wrote down like the vibe is like really melancholic, if that's even a word. It's sort of really melancholic. I don't know.
I think it
And
was just the fact they chose it as a lead single. I mean, it's a perfect album closer. So when you listen to it in sequence, I think. But yeah, I mean, it was. I think still for me, it's probably because obviously I heard that a few more times before the album came out. So I think I've learned over the years as I get older as well, though, especially through listening to vinyl when you have to listen to the whole sequence of tracks. I appreciate an album more now because of its whole flow. Where before with a CD, it's easier to skip tracks. But yeah, so that's probably why the track was probably my least favourite because I didn't feel necessarily that it was the right choice of lead single, but it is Deftones, so they can do what they want and get away with it.
I was just curious, since you have the vinyl, is yours like a gatefold? Does yours look the same thing on that on the vinyl?
Um, I no, well, I got I ordered this is the special edition version because it came with a zine as well. But no, I mean with it, it's just a single
I was just wondering if it had different artwork on the
No,
inside.
it's just this sort of double-sided sleeve there, and then it came with a zine, which is sort of unseen pictures in the studio and stuff like that.
Oh, I've never seen
And then
that.
it's just I think it was just just a clear vinyl, this one. So yeah, I think obviously I know with Deftones the last few albums, especially CD wise, they generally just come in those kind of card sleeves, don't they? Which is you get a bit less sort of information and not necessarily a booklet or anything. But I know Deftones have always been quite a mystical kind of band in terms of not giving too much away, and you did get a booklet in that one. Yeah. See, like I said, that's why I was saying to you before. I've been going with the vinyls because OMS is the only one I haven't actually got on CD at the moment. So. Yeah. Yeah, so some of those pictures ended up in this zine, which was part of this release of the album.
Anyway, yeah, so Ohms, obviously, yeah, I feel like in a couple of years, Ohms could, well, I have it number 3, so it's just a matter of, again, my top 3 or top 4 in general could just all be flipped around depending on my day, mood, month, year, whatever. If I were to come back next year, Ohms could be number 1. I don't know. I know, basically, ever since Ohms came out, I've given the back catalog a break. I think I was telling Matt that a couple of days. I couldn't remember. I was telling one of you two, but I think I was just telling Matt that just yesterday or something, that ever since Ohms came out, I've kind of gave the back catalog a break, and I've just been listening to Ohms basically for that entire year. Well, it just turned 2022, so I'm not going to say it's 2 years old. It's more or less like a year old, nice solid year. And I've been basically playing Ohms as my go-to Deftones album practically that entire year. Yeah, like that's how good it was. So I gave actually the back catalog a break because Ohms is so good. I've been basically playing that for about a year straight since it has came out. And so Ohms number 3. So next up we got number 2. We got Around the Fur for Me. And obviously this is one of their iconic classic albums. This you can do no wrong. Obviously Bryan did have it, I think, as number 8 least favorite. So that's quite the vast difference between his number 8 and it's number 2 for me. So obviously there's a bit of agree to disagree on that. But for me, I think for your whatever, a generalized Deftones fan, this is like kind of the iconic essential album, as you'd call it, or maybe maybe he not agree or whatever, but cool band picture. But anyway, yeah, Around the Fur is kind of a classic to me. I would have got this right back when it was released. I was growing up and a new metal kid at the time, right? Kind of a lot of the things where it was like rap metal, not rap metal, but people were. I think at that time I was wearing like FUBU, but I was also wearing like a Cannibal Corpse shirt, right? It was just that sign of the times, right? Where you wear like baggy jeans, the new metal jean, but then I'd wear like a Cannibal Corpse shirt or something. So it was just that total like mix of styles at that time. But obviously there's a ton of stand-up tracks, and obviously I probably might have a little bit of nostalgia tied to this one specifically, just because it is a strong, heavy album. There's a lot of heavier screaming, heavier stuff going on here. So it is why I do still have it ranked quite high for me. But I also did want to maybe bring up discussion about the Mile in Summer music video. That was a cool music video, right? When they're playing on the water, and then the sharks are in the water. There's I think there's a cage, but they're singing on the water, and it's got the cool music video for the time. Yeah, and then the Mile in Summer, you got Labia. Around the Fur has a nice, cool drum beat opener there. He's kind of just a nice little drum beat opening. Abe Cunningham. Also, Abe Cunningham's a great drummer. I think he probably needs a shout out or respect here.
Yeah,
Abe's a great drummer, great diverse drummer. And Ricketts has it for 1997. That actually may be a sign of things to come with Deftones, where the sound got thicker and bigger as they kind of went along. Well, the tone, I think he probably changed guitars and added a couple strings, added another string, so it just made the Deftones sound a lot thicker and heavier as time went on. But I think Ricketts was a good sign of things to come with a bigger, thicker sound. If anyone is kind of watching this, when you do listen to Ricketts, think about, hey, it's kind of a bigger, thicker sound for the time, for them, where they were headed later down the road. We got Be Quiet and Drive. I believe there was a music video for that where they're playing kind of in just like an old parking lot. I think they're playing like an old parking lot sort of thing. And that's kind of a classic music video for us, or for me, or whatever. And Lotion banger. And then Head Up with Max Cavalera from Soulfly was on that track, and they got together and created this banger and great riff on that. They're trading off, doing vocals, they're screaming and singing and screaming. Just an incredible track that they play off each other. I think they were really in the zone, and because Max's step brother or some step cousin, or sorry, I'm not connecting that properly, but one of Max's family members had passed right at the time when they were making this song, and they actually they kind of made that song in dedication to Dana Wells, Max's cousin. And actually, I kind of did a little bit of research on that as well, is that I don't know how they were connected, but I guess Deftones is really good friends with that Dana Wells guy. So that's actually what inspired that Head Up song, the song that finished. Actually, I thought it finished the album, but it doesn't. It's number 9 on the album, and then there's one song after. But Head Up is great. They did that they kind of were inspired and did that in a dedication tribute to Dana Wells that passed, and yeah, that was a great song. And it does feel weird to just go into my number 1 like that, but my number 1, I guess it's obviously no surprise if anyone's been, closely been paying attention to my list, but it's hard to keep up with everyone's list in general. So there's clearly only one last pick for me, and it's kind of interesting. It's kind of even surprised me that it made my number 1, just because maybe the last time I did a Deftones ranking, I had Koi number 1. So how this one all of a sudden rose up and became my number 1, I have no idea. But we got Diamond Eyes, and I don't think I'm super off, because as far as I'm correct, no one else has shown it yet. So
no,
I don't think Bryan or Matt has shown this yet. So I might be on par with having it quite high on my list. So I'm clearly not way off here. So Diamond Eyes, my number 1. What does actually the little sticker say here? I'll try to read it. All right, it does zoom in. Yeah, here we go. We got Deftones Diamond Eyes featuring Rocket Skates and Diamond Eyes. Deftones.com right there. So we got the cool little hype sticker on there. I would have got this used, and I didn't stick the sticker on there, but someone else did. So that's kind of cool that the hype sticker is still there. But yeah, if anytime you're going to pick an album as your number 1, you basically like the whole album. So I could just say every single song as a favorite song, but I did picked out some specific favorites. But I also do want to start off and mention that I think this is the album that is a great balance between old and new. So what year is this again? Yeah, 2010. So it almost is that, even year-wise, it is that balance between new and old. But that the year itself had nothing to do with me saying that. It was just when I listened to it, it's just the perfect balance of the albums that came after and the albums that came before. Like, this was that in-between balance, and they just everything came together for me on this album through my eyes, through my diamond eyes. But yeah, this is just a perfect balance between old Deftones and new Deftones. They just nailed that perfect balance, even though Ohms is kind of a nice balance as well. So, but we already talked about that. But yeah, Diamond Eyes, the title track, Royal, Command Control, You've Seen the Butcher, even Beauty School is kind of like, I wouldn't say ballad, but Beauty School is more of a softer ballad, but has great sonics. I do really like Beauty School. Rocket Skates has this super thick, heavy tone, and Chimo's screaming And he does that really cool woo at the end of at the end of a couple choruses. He'll be like screaming and he'll be like woo, his little woo that he does. That's really cool. I like that. And then Risk, This Place Is Death, 976 Evils, pretty cool too. But then the closer, This Place Is Death, I believe that's a banger or somewhat of a banger. I didn't actually write anything specific about that. But yeah, Diamond Eyes, as I played it back, I just kind of, I had to stick something as number one, and I could have easily had Koi, Ohms, Diamond Eyes, and even Around the Fur, all's my number one. So just maybe by chance or this year, this month, or whatever this year that I had Diamond Eyes as my number one.
Awesome.
And Brian, I guess we'll get up to get your top three.
So just like you, I had three. Ohms as three. I did like that album. It felt like White Pony 2.0. And obviously Terry Date, which we talked about, came back to help them produce it. So I think that helped them get their fire back, as we said. My number two is Koi no Koyan. I did like that album a lot. One of my standout tracks is Entombed, which is actually I think my favorite song by Deftones. I like the vibe of that. It's really kind of artsy, kind of airy. I don't know. I really like that song. And my number one, like you, I have Diamond Eyes.
Oh, there we go. We both have number one, Diamond Eyes. That's great. That's cool. That's interesting. Do you have any standout tracks off the top of your head, or if you?
I love the bass tone of Risk. The title track is awesome. Those are my top two off that album.
Yeah, great album. Obviously, we both agreed on that one. I think we probably disagreed on all the order. Not disagreed, a healthy disagree. But that was probably one time me and you came together for this one. So that's great. That's cool. Cool stuff. And yeah, I guess Matt's probably not. He's probably trying to hold off on chiming because probably some of those are in his picks. So he's probably trying to hold off chiming, and I would have already said what I had to say about all those. So Matt, we'll get your top three here.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to go with Around the Fur for number three. Now, I know generally when you speak to anybody in the nu metal forums or Deftones fans, Around the Fur does seem to be the overwhelming favourite. But again, it's because of the quality of Deftones' discography. That's why for me it's at number three. But I did feel that at the time it was a hell of an evolution from Adrenaline. As we discussed earlier, Adrenaline was generally sort of more rap metal orientated, and with Around the Fur, there was that next stage in the band becoming more of an alternative metal band. Those melodies coming in on My Own Summer, for example, in the chorus, and Be Quiet and Drive. I mean, that is still one of my top five Deftones songs to this day. But with that album, they sort of perfectly mixed together the heaviness with the melody, more atmospherics in there. The final track, MX, I think that's one of the best album closers of any album that I've heard. And Die the Flu as well. That's another song that seems to get a lot of praise from that album. That was something a bit different as well, which possibly coming off of Adrenaline isn't the sort of song you'd ever sort of anticipate Deftones coming up with. But yeah, that was the one that sort of really put Deftones on the map, and it sort of continued their early momentum, took them sort of global in terms of being able to come across to Europe and everywhere to sort of tour and build their fan base up, which sort of went in perfectly, obviously, into their next album, which I will touch on in a minute because number two for me just is Diamond Eyes. So it's pretty obvious what my number one is. I remember when this came out, I was probably pleasantly surprised, really, because as we touched on again with Saturday Night Risk before it, that was when the band seemed to be having a few struggles. There possibly was even some sort of chatter as to whether the band would sort of go on, ever sort of continue. Obviously, Chi had his accident, passed away. They brought in Sergio Vega for Diamond Eyes. And for me, I know Brian just touched on OMS being a potential White Pony 2.0, but I felt that Diamond Eyes was. It seemed to there was again the songs, especially early on, the songs were a bit more to the point. I think it's Royal or Command Control was less than 3 minutes. It was just quick in and out songs, relentless energy, a rawness and a heaviness to it. But again, a diversity in there as well, like Beauty School, as you touched upon. Again, it's one of those dreamy kind of almost alternative rock songs, but it was just a typical Deftones one with Chino's voice. Prince is another one of my standout tracks. I think that reminded me with the sort of the percussion and that in it and some of the electronics, that reminded me a lot of RX Queen from White Pony. It had a similar sort of beat to it from the beginning. But yes, I think it's very close in a sense to being my number one. But White Pony does just about get to number two, and that is because forever and ever, White Pony will be my favourite Deftones album. That was just as I mentioned with Around the Fur, you could tell that Deftones was building their sound still, potentially looking to find their own identity. And then when White Pony came out, I think it was just the greatest progression from one album to the next from any band. I think just from there's songs like Elite on there, which is very early Deftones-esque, but just in general, the songwriting, the layers, the multi-layers that included on every song, and the different styles that they experimented with all the way through. I mean, Digital Bath straight in at number two there. It's just unlike anything else that Deftones have ever written. And then going in with Elite afterwards, which of course won a Grammy Award, which is, I've always found it strange in terms of the Grammys, how a song like Elite, which didn't really get any promotion other than being on the album, it wasn't released as a single or anything, yet it was nominated for a Best Metal Performance Grammy and it won. So that just shows the appeal to Elite. And then you've got the RX Queen track there, which I think it was uncredited, but featured Scott Weiland from Stone Temple Pilots in the backing vocals, which was really cool as well. Not quite sure why they didn't sort of credit him on there, but you can hear it in the song that I'm pretty sure it was RX Queen, but he's definitely on one of those. Knife Party again, another killer song. Passenger, which features Maynard, like you said earlier, Jamie. I'm actually just finishing off my next book, which is on Tool, and I've just written quite an extended piece about Passenger for it, with Maynard's involvement. So it's a cool little backstory for him sort of getting on that song, because he wasn't intended to. They just asked him at the end if he wanted to do it. He was hanging around with the band in the studio, just sort of offering ideas and feedback to the ideas they already had for the songs. And then he just basically got up and started singing in a microphone, and then from there, Chino and Maynard, they basically passed a bit of paper back and forward writing the lyrics, and that's sort of effectively how that song came to be. And when you hear the lyrics, supposedly the song is about having sex in a car. So there we are. And yeah, Change in the House of Flies. Yeah, that was the lead single from that album. And thinking back, I'm not sure if it would have been My Own Summer or Change, which would have been actually the first Deftones song I heard. And again, I remember that music video. It was very big budget. And that chorus again is just insane. And Pink Maggot is a good closer, which I prefer than the Back to School single. But as you touched on there, the record label effectively asked Deftones to write a rap metal song in keeping with the time, and Chino wrote that, I think he said, in about an hour or so, basically proving how easy it was to write a song like that. But yeah, for me, White Pony stands as my favourite, and I don't think it'll ever be beaten. And I was actually a bit disappointed with the anniversary edition they released last year, because I thought the remixes were not great.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it was really poor. There wasn't. I mean, I bought the. They did a remix of Digital Bath, which they released as a picture disc single for Record Store Day, which I bought. But the actual I've never been a massive fan of remixes anyway, and I think that kind of put a little bit of a stain on the legacy of the album. But no, for White Pony as it is, that's yeah, my number one.
Yeah, awesome. And actually, I was going to ask you about if you knew a bit of more, a better story with that back to school song, but you basically already kind of told it. But I was going to ask you that after, but you kind of already told it. But I remember, yeah, just kind of coming across saying how they didn't, how Chino or whatever, some of the band doesn't really like that song. They were kind of forced into it, sort of thing. And but I find it fine. I don't. The story, if a band member says they don't like a particular song, it's not going to change my view too much, really. But
I think it was also funny that when they reissued the album, they actually put that at the start of the album, which, like as track one, I've got a different version of White Pony on CD. I think it's a German version or something, which actually comes with a B-side as well. But they actually threw Back to School in as track one on there, which I think Deftones were especially unhappy with because it kind of ruined the flow of how the intended 11 track should have been. So maybe they should have popped it on the end there as a bonus track or whatever. But yeah, I mean, for what it was, I mean, I love Limp Bizkit and all the rap metal bands from that time, and they basically, that again, it all comes down to record label pressure. The record labels kind of had a little bit of control over their bands, and they've more or less sort of forced Deftones to go in and create a song such as that. And it's definitely not a bad song. It wouldn't be in my top 10 of theirs, but it's, I think the video still gets frequently played on the music channels over here, so at least it did create its own legacy.
yeah, I know the CD version I have is just the old school OG copy. It's not like a reissue. So
Yeah,
that back to school song is not even on my this. So if I have to listen to back to school, it would just be like a digital version that I have on my computer.
yeah.
So I actually don't even put it on a CD sort of thing.
Yeah, so I have this one as well, which was I think they released it in a red case as well as a black case,
Oh, that's cool.
and I don't know how many copies were made. Apparently, mine's number 9,467. But with the case, is literally like that. It's just got the tracks on the front. So on this one, actually, no, this one hasn't got Back to School on it, but it does have a 12th track, and I can't quite remember what it was now. I know it was in the. If you go on Wikipedia, you can see. I'm not sure if it's in here. The Boys Republic.
Hmm.
This was the bit they did a B side called the Boys Republic for White Pony, which I can't remember. I don't think it even got released on the B sides and rarities album. But they also did a. Are you guys familiar with the Crenshaw Punch song that they released on that B sides? That was a killer tune, which obviously never got put on an album, but that was one that got left off of an album session. That was a killer Deftones song as well.
Is that an original song or a cover song?
That's one of their own. I think on the B sides and rarities album, it's listed as Crenshaw Rocks or Crenshaw Punch. I'll throw rocks at you or something. But it's that's got a killer lead riff, which is probably one of my favorite Deftones songs as well.
I'm actually glad that you did bring up that B-sides and covers album, the B-sides thing. Is I probably would have forgot, but I know I'm not a huge cover song guy. Like sometimes like cover songs are good, sometimes they're bad. But I thought Deftones is Simple Man
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
is amazing. It is
Yeah.
fantastic. I love that cover song. I probably like it. I probably listen to that more than I like Leonard Skinner, so I have some Leonard Skinner, but I think I actually probably prefer their version more, which is quite quite unique. But yeah, I thought Simple Man is amazing. If anyone's never heard that Deftones Simple Man cover, after the video or pause it, go check that song out. It is amazing. I thought anyway.
It's a good one to showcase Chino's voice as well, because the harmonies in the chorus, especially that he puts in, yeah, there was some good covers on there. I can't quite remember. They did a Sade cover on there, wasn't there? I think there was a Duran Duran cover on there, a Cure cover, Savoury. I think that was another one that I quite liked as well. So they're definitely they've done some. I like the fact that they don't necessarily pick common covers. I mean, Simple Man I know has been covered a few times by various bands, but they do generally seem to pick obscure songs and then put their own spin on them, which is better than just obviously a complete replica of an original song. They put their own spin on it, and then you can tell it's effective. It is a Deftones song. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, it's weird to think that they Deftonized a a 70s Southern rock classic and Deftonized it, but then also did keep some of the like original sound and vibe to it. I don't know. Yeah, that Simple Man is just fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, I suppose we're kind of winding down on the show here. We did our ranking. We all said what we had to say. We gave our love for Deftones and things like that. And I think I don't know, maybe Matt or if Bryan, if you know about if any news has been coming out, if they're working on a next album or anything like that, or if they got plans for the future, or
who knows the way things have been the last couple of years. I mean, I think they've been trying to get out on tour, but I would imagine at some point their shows have been cancelled. But then a lot of other bands have been sort of working on new music because that's all they could do. So hopefully, but you never know with Deftones. Sometimes they can go 4 or 5 years without nothing, and then or they can come back within 2 years. So I don't anticipate there'll be a new album for maybe another year or two yet, but who knows?
yeah, I thought I seen something recently that they were in the studio working or something, or maybe
Awesome.
maybe it was just Stefan was saying that he's writing songs for the next album. So who knows what that really means? I don't know. It's something I could be wrong or something. I thought I seen something like that, and maybe I will just get. I don't know if you guys. I did mention Crosses, the Chino's side project, and I know he's had some other ones. Are you guys a fan of any particular side project? The Team Sleep, the Palms. So maybe if anyone wants to chime in on like maybe any of the side projects that caught your ear.
I enjoyed the Team Sleep album when that first came out. I think that was back in 2003, 2004, something like that. There was a few good tunes on there. I haven't listened to as much of the Palms. I do remember, I can't remember if it was an EP or an album. And then some of the Crosses as well, yeah. But I think out of the of those little side projects, Team Sleep was probably my favourite.
Bryan, did you ever listen to the Palms or the Crosses or anything like
Not
that?
really, actually.
Oh, okay, yeah, right. Yeah, I
There was
know.
also one really cool. I think Chino and Stefan was on a track with Tech Nine, a hip hop artist. I don't know if you've heard that. That's a really good collaboration as well on one of his albums. I can't quite remember off the top of my head what the song's called, but if you search Tech Nine and Deftones, yeah, Deftones gone hip hop. That's a pretty good collaboration as well. And
I
of
know.
course, Chino was on Korn's the Wicked cover that Korn did on Life Is Peachy as well. So there's a load of guest spots all over as well. It's always worth checking out.
I know I was watching Chino was doing those live in the studio clips. Or a lot like I think just during COVID, the shutdown, he was doing some like once in a while he'd go live and do some like just chit chat or whatever and say some bullshit or something, whatever. But Chino actually recommended a band to me that I had never heard. So Chino actually recommended a band that I later got into after he started talking about it. He played, I think he would do he would play some songs and talk about some of the songs, but he actually recommended a band to me and they're slipping my mind right now. They're like an old 90s kind of screamo-y type band. And I wish I knew the name. I didn't think it was going to come up or nothing like that, but it's funny. He actually, when I was watching his little clip that he had, he played a song, and I was like, "Hey, that band is cool." And then I later checked that band out, and I liked them, but I kind of thought it was funny about usually it's fans or whatever, trying to recommend bands. I thought it was funny that Chino recommended me. He recommended a band for me, and I liked it, but I wish I knew the name. Gosh darn it, I forget.
Hmm.
I forget. They were kind of like a '90s screamo band that I had never heard of. I really wish I knew the name, but anyway, that's that. I'll probably remember right after I turn off the video, or I'll look it up and be like, damn, I wish I knew. I kind of said it on the video, but anyway, I kind of thought that was cool that Chino, that I got a recommendation from Chino that I liked. But anyway, that's kind of cool. But anyway, cool. I think we'll kind of end the show at that. We kind of said what we said. Thanks to guests for doing this. Thanks Matt for doing this as well, and Bryan as well. Bryan almost missed out. We were waiting around for Bryan for half an hour to do the show, and then right as we were started, he joined in. So it's great that he did make it as well. So thanks, Bryan, for coming along and making it as well. And we'll end the show at that if you want to say your goodbyes. And then I will try to link the direct Amazon links to Matt's books as well. So check those out. Badass stuff with the definitive new metal guide and the Korn book. And then as you guys all heard, we got a little taste into what he's working on next. His tool book. Is that done, or is that done? You finished
I'm
it?
about 2,000 words short at the minute. So once we have a 50,000 word count minimum. So yeah, once we get that done, that'll be off to the publisher, and then probably going to be, I'd imagine, a June, July release, I would have thought. So fingers crossed, yeah. So it should be done this month, and then we'll be straight on to the next one.
Cool. I'm not a huge tool nut. I do like a lot of tool stuff. I guess that's a whole nother discussion on itself, but I casually like Tool. I know I really love the Tool demo. I don't want to be one of those guys, demo guys, but man, that Tool demo still hits me hard. Anyway, that's a whole nother discussion for you, for yourself. But I'm kind of more of a casual Tool guy. As we kind of progress later into Tool sound, I'm kind of more of a casual. So, but that's cool stuff. I know a lot of Deftones and Tool kind of ties together. The fan base is quite similar, so I would imagine anyone that is watching this has stuck around this long to watch our Deftones chat does probably like Tool, so be on the lookout for that as well. And yeah, thanks to all the guests for doing this, and thanks for anyone watching. And we'll say our goodbyes. Subscribe, mosh, and see you later. All that kind of good stuff.